Do you believe that the souls of the dead sometimes remain in our world? What if we told you right now that there are real, documented cases and recordings that seem to prove exactly that? If you now think that ghosts only exist in movies and that there has to be a logical explanation for everything, then we're already very curious to hear how you explain these 10 mysterious cases. Number 10. A Visit from Beyond. Robbie Hodge's eerie recording. When Jennifer Hodge was watching TV with her 21-year-old daughter Lauren in the bedroom of their home near Atlanta on the evening of January 5th, 2019, nothing suggested what was about to happen. Jennifer was already about to fall asleep when an automatic notification from her security system suddenly appeared on her smartphone. The notification essentially said that the camera in the entryway had detected a person. This immediately sent the two women into a panic, because Jennifer and Lauren were certain they were alone in the house. But when they opened the attached image, they didn't see an ordinary intruder, but a pale, almost transparent, eerie figure in the adjoining kitchen. In the grainy black and white image, a human shape can be seen next to a cabinet. The head and upper body seem to be there, at least in rough outline, while the rest of the apparition appears to merge with the darkroom. It looks like a person who became visible for just a single fleeting moment. Pretty creepy. Lauren is said to have recognized the figure immediately. She looked at the screen and whispered to her mother, "Mom, there's a person in the kitchen. Mom, that's Robbie." Robbie Hodge was Jennifer's son and Lauren's brother, but there was no possible way he could have been standing in that kitchen, because he had already died more than 2 years earlier, at the age of just 23. Robbie had struggled with addiction, while at the same time working to help others affected by it. Together with his mother, he had founded an organization intended to help people pay for addiction treatment. In November 2016, according to his family, Robbie took a pill that looked like the anti-anxiety medication Xanax. In reality, it was apparently a dangerous counterfeit. A few days later, on December 4th, 2016, he died. For Jennifer, his death was an immeasurable loss. More than 2 years later, she and Lauren now believed they could recognize Robbie's face, his beard, and the outlines of his body in the image from their security camera of all places. The apparition was indistinct, but to the two women, the resemblance was said to be unmistakable. Despite their shock, mother and daughter immediately ran into the kitchen, but when they got there, the room was completely empty. They found no one anywhere else in the house either. According to them, there were no signs of a break-in and no explanation for who or what could have been standing in front of the camera. It is precisely this detail that makes the case so mysterious. Jennifer didn't simply happen to discover the figure at some point while looking through old recordings. The security system had reacted at that exact moment, apparently identified the apparition as a person, and actively alerted Jennifer. That was the only reason the two women looked at the image in the first place. So, what exactly did the security camera capture that evening? Was it really the soul of Robbie, who had died 2 years earlier? According to Jennifer, nothing comparable happened in her home either before or after that. She didn't necessarily see the apparition as threatening, but rather as a comforting message from her deceased son. To her, it was as if Robbie had wanted to show her, in this way, that he was okay and that he continued to exist somewhere else. But can a person actually become visible again for a brief moment after death? Is something like that really possible? And if something of our consciousness survives the body, could it then find a way to make contact with the living, perhaps even with the help of a camera? Of course, based on the single blurry image, it is impossible to determine with certainty what was in front of the lens. A reflection, infrared light, or faulty image recognition are also conceivable in principle. Nevertheless, three remarkable details remain: the system's automatic person alert, the immediate reaction of the two women, and the resemblance to Robbie that they both believed they could see in the figure. Whether the camera merely captured an optical effect or, for one fleeting moment, made something visible that normally remains hidden, is ultimately something everyone has to decide for themselves. At this point, a quick question for you. Do you believe that ghosts really exist? Just write yes or no in the comments below. We're very curious to hear your opinions. Number 9. The dead girl on the cemetery camera. The security camera at Masonic Cemetery in Las Cruces in the U.S. state of New Mexico had been installed for a terrible reason. A family had buried their murdered son James there and suspected that the killer, who had not yet been caught, was damaging his grave. To finally obtain evidence, they mounted a camera on a nearby headstone. But when the family reviewed the nighttime footage, there was no grave vandal to be seen. Instead, the image showed a small, bright figure standing completely alone among the graves. It had the size and outline of a little girl. The apparition is said to have walked directly to James's grave and knelt down in front of it. In the images, it almost looks as though the girl is talking to someone, even though no one could be seen there. Afterward, she looked to the side once more and disappeared into a dark area of the cemetery. At first, the family didn't think of a ghost. They feared that a small child might actually have been wandering alone through the cemetery at night, so they showed the footage to the staff. But one of them is said to have recognized the figure immediately and said, "We know this little girl." The employee then led the family to another grave in the same cemetery. Buried there was 2-year-old Fabiola Nova Rodriguez. Fabiola, affectionately called Favi by her family, had died on September 6, 2018, under extremely tragic and suspicious circumstances while she was in the care of her mother's then-boyfriend. Doctors found multiple severe injuries, and the man was later charged with child abuse, resulting in death. At that point, Faviola's mother, Sandra Gonzalez, knew nothing about the camera or the mysterious footage. Toys and personal belongings had previously disappeared from Faviola's grave as well, which is why Sandra had asked the cemetery management to keep a closer watch. The following day, James's family returned to the cemetery. There, they happened to meet Sandra and Faviola's grandmother at the girl's grave. The two families apparently did not know each other, and yet James's family now had footage that possibly showed Sandra's deceased daughter. When Sandra saw the image on the smartphone, she immediately burst into tears. To her, there was no doubt the small figure had the same height, the same dark curls, and similar facial features as her daughter. Sandra is said to have simply said, "I know that's my daughter." When compared side by side, the silhouette does indeed resemble Fabiola. What seems particularly eerie, however, is that the figure apparently did not wander aimlessly through the cemetery, but appeared directly at James's grave. For Sandra, this scene had a meaning that was as sad as it was comforting. She was absolutely convinced that Fabiola had come to James to comfort him, and eventually accompany him to heaven. Both had died tragically, and at the time, both families felt that justice had not yet been served. Can the soul of a child actually continue to exist? And could Fabiola have left not only a sign for her mother that night, but also kept another deceased person company? It must be said, however, that the publicly released footage is blurry and mainly exists as enlarged still images. For that reason, an unknown person, a technical image error, or an optical illusion cannot be ruled out. Nevertheless, what remains is a mysterious connection between two families who apparently did not know each other before, and a mother who believed she recognized her deceased daughter in the small figure without hesitating for even a second. subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. It's completely free and helps us continue making exciting videos like these. Thank you. Number 8. The eerie figure in the children's bedroom. When a 2-year-old child talks to someone at night, most parents initially think of an imaginary friend. But what a camera captured in little Amber Mackenzie's bedroom made her family question this harmless explanation. The case occurred in early 2021 in Las Vegas. Amber shared a room with her brother Michael, who was just 7 months old. Her grandmother, Tori Mackenzie, learned that the girl often stayed awake at night, laughed, and seemed to be talking to someone, even though no one other than the 2 children was in the room. At first, this didn't seem particularly concerning. Small children have vivid imaginations, and sometimes have conversations with people who exist only in their imagination. But one night, the girl's tone changed. The family suddenly heard Amber clearly say, "No," and then go away. Things became even more mysterious when Amber's father thought he heard his mother Tori's voice coming from the children's bedroom. But when he checked, she wasn't even in the house. To find out what was happening during the night, Tori installed a motion-activated night vision camera in the children's bedroom. 4 days later, she checked the footage and came across a disturbing still image. Between the children's beds, a tall, human-like figure appears to be standing. Its body looks hunched and unusually thin. Around its head, 2 bright streaks can be seen that, at first glance, look like horns. Its hands also appear strikingly long due to the blurriness. Just a few steps away lie Amber and her little brother. The image is said to have been captured shortly before 3 a.m. Tori explained that all the adults were asleep at the time. When she saw the image, she said she had to look twice. She then ran to the nearby home of her son Ryan to show it to him. He too couldn't explain who or what could have been there. Ryan then took the children out of the room and initially had them sleep with him. Tori later posted the image in a paranormal phenomena group because she hoped to find an explanation or help there. She swore that she had not edited the image and had not been seeking attention by posting it. But perhaps the crucial question isn't whether the blurry figure actually looks supernatural. What matters much more is why Amber, even before the image was captured, is said to have been talking to an unseen presence and eventually told it to go away. Who or what did the little girl see on those nights? Was it simply the boundless imagination of a child? Or do children sometimes perceive something that adults have long since lost access to? This single blurry image cannot conclusively prove a paranormal encounter. With night vision cameras, movement, infrared light, and a longer exposure time can make an ordinary person appear severely distorted. However, who might have been in the children's bedroom in this case was never determined. Number 7. The Ghost Intruder. It was 3:40 a.m. on October 21st, 2022, when Amanda Pitt from Pennsylvania was suddenly jolted awake. The mother of 4 heard slow, heavy footsteps downstairs in her house. At first, she thought it was her husband Jeffrey, but when she turned around, he was still lying beside her. If he wasn't walking through the house, then who on earth was? Panicked, Amanda grabbed her phone and opened the live feed from the security camera. She expected that she might see a burglar. Instead, she spotted a creepy, human-like figure in the doorway leading to the kitchen. In the dark footage, an almost transparent body can be made out. Near the top, something can be seen that clearly looks like a face. In enlarged, contrast-enhanced images, it almost looks as though a strange woman is standing there, staring directly into the camera. What a terrifying scene. Amanda stared at the screen in disbelief. Then she woke Jeffrey and sent him downstairs to search the house. But there was no one there. There were no signs of a break-in. No exterior door had been left open, and there was no stranger hiding anywhere in the house. Only the family dog, Ollie, was pacing around the kitchen, noticeably restless. When Amanda opened the live feed again, the figure was gone. But she had managed to save screenshots in time, so something had actually appeared on the camera. But what? Amanda couldn't fall back asleep that night. She turned on the TV and kept checking the camera over and over again. Even the next morning, she was still wondering whether her tired eyes might have been playing tricks on her. But apparently, this wasn't the first strange incident in the house. Amanda and her family had moved in 2020. For almost 1 year, nothing unusual happened, but when they were out, they repeatedly received notifications from the security camera, even though no one was home, and they heard unexplained noises. On one occasion, the camera is said to have recorded a door seemingly opening by itself. On another occasion, the kitchen faucet is said to have turned on for no apparent reason. The family also learned that the previous residents had lived in the house for only a short time. Why they had moved out again so quickly remained a mystery. Amanda had not believed in ghosts before. But the loud footsteps, the restless dog, and the mysterious figure made her seriously question that belief. At one point, the family was even so unsettled that they seriously considered moving. Perhaps the image merely shows a reflection or a technical distortion from the night vision camera. Perhaps shadows and image noise just happened to form the silhouette of a person. But why did Amanda hear footsteps immediately beforehand? And why did the apparition disappear at the exact moment Jeffrey came downstairs? If ghosts really are the souls of the dead, perhaps they don't always reveal themselves clearly or in a way that everyone can see. Perhaps all that remains of some people are fleeting traces. A sound in an empty house, a movement out of the corner of your eye, or a figure that appears on a camera for just a few seconds. Amanda heard someone walking through her house that night, and when she looked at the camera, someone already seemed to be waiting for her in her kitchen. But what exactly can be seen in this image? Could this image actually be proof that ghosts exist? Souls that cannot find peace and therefore continue to haunt the living world? Number 6. The ghost hand above the crib. For William Grave from Sheffield, it was actually a special moment. His 9-month-old son, Xander, was going to sleep alone in his own room for the first time. But to still be able to keep an eye on him at all times, William and his wife, like many parents do, set up a modern baby monitor with a camera and motion detection in the room. The night was quiet. Xander slept well through the night and didn't wake up until the next morning. But when William later checked the recordings in the app, he discovered a movement at 6:50 a.m. that he couldn't explain. In the dark infrared video, Xander is lying peacefully in his crib. Suddenly, a pale, arm-like shape appears and seems to move through the bars of the crib. For a brief moment, it looks as though a hand is reaching over the child and reaching for his pacifier before disappearing from the frame again. William initially kept the whole thing to himself and thought there must be a completely ordinary explanation. Throughout the day, he repeatedly asked his wife whether she might have been in Xander's room. But according to the parents, they didn't enter the room until 8:24 a.m., more than 90 minutes after the footage, with the creepy arm was recorded. In addition, William's wife usually wore a distinctive Pandora bracelet. But there is no sign of it on the mysterious arm. William later explained that this was why he was certain that neither he nor his wife could be seen in the video. The footage became especially eerie for him because strange incidents were said to have already occurred in this house before. William has lived there since he was 19 years old. Several people independently reported seeing an older woman who was said to occasionally appear at one of the house's windows. In total, 4 different people are said to have described the same woman in very similar ways. William therefore wondered whether the arm might possibly have belonged to this unknown apparition. At the same time, he thought of his mother, who had died just a few months earlier. The thought that she might be watching over her grandson was very comforting to him. However, he didn't want to commit to any particular explanation. He simply said that he didn't know who the hand belonged to, only that it belonged to neither him nor his wife. So was the apparition something threatening that was trying to reach for the baby? Or does the careful movement instead show a deceased relative who wanted to check on the sleeping child one more time? Perhaps such footage wouldn't prove that ghosts enter our world, but rather that the connection to a loved one doesn't completely end even with death. Of course, infrared light, motion blur, or parts of the bedding can easily look like a hand in nighttime footage. After all, no independent technical examination of the video is known to have taken place. Nevertheless, what remains is the eerie scene of a peacefully sleeping baby, and a pale shape that seemingly moves through the bars of his crib. Number 5. The eerie figure on the cemetery wall. On the night of August 11th, 2024, 2 security guards at Jardins de Montesacro Cemetery in Itagüí, Colombia, had an extremely eerie encounter. At around 2 a.m., they apparently heard a female voice repeatedly calling for help in desperation. When the men went to investigate, they discovered a motionless, human-like figure above a cemetery wall. Of all places, she was right by the electric fence that was meant to protect the grounds from unauthorized entry. How the woman had gotten there remained completely unclear. One of the guards took out his smartphone and began filming. In the dark, shaky footage, a pale figure can indeed be seen above the wall. She appears to have a head, an upper body, and legs hanging downward, but barely moves. The security guard tried several times to speak to her. He asked what had happened, what kind of help she needed, and whether he should call the police. But the creepy figure didn't respond. At the same time, he warned her not to touch the electric fence or enter the grounds, since guard dogs were also roaming the area. But as soon as the camera was pointed at her, the mysterious woman is said to have fallen silent. For several minutes, she remained motionless in the same spot without answering the men's questions. Finally, she is said to have disappeared just as suddenly as she had appeared. Who was this woman calling for help from a cemetery in the middle of the night? Could she possibly have been a confused person who had entered the grounds unnoticed? Or could the guards actually have encountered the soul of a deceased person who could find no peace and was desperately trying to be noticed by the living? It is precisely her plea for help that makes the case so unsettling. Because if ghosts really are the souls of deceased people, could it be that some of them have not yet found their way to the afterlife? They could be trapped between 2 worlds, visible for only a few moments, and unable to explain exactly what is still keeping them bound to this place. Absolutely creepy. However, the poor image quality makes it impossible to tell who or what was actually above the wall. A living person who was confused or under the influence of drugs would also be conceivable in this case. But the nighttime cries for help, the unusual location by the electric fence, and the sudden silence apparently left the 2 security guards with an extremely eerie impression. Number 4. The ghost that led to its own body. Mary Ann Winkowski from Ohio claims that she has been able to see and communicate with the dead since childhood. Her experiences served as inspiration for the television series Ghost Whisperer, on which she later also worked as a consultant. But one of the most disturbing cases in her decades of work led not only to a message from beyond, but to a hidden body. The story began with a phone call from a man. He told Winkowski that his mother had died 7 months earlier. Since then, however, he believed that she was haunting his house, possibly because she had not received the funeral she had wanted. Winkowski agreed to visit the house together with her husband Ted. As soon as she entered, she claims to have seen the deceased woman, an older woman in a green tracksuit who stood restlessly in the room and kept repeating the same words, "I'm here, I'm here." At first, this might have seemed like an ordinary ghostly apparition, but then the woman in the green tracksuit asked a question that gave the entire case a shocking turn. When were they finally going to get her body out of this house? At that moment, Winkowski says she realized that although the woman had already been dead for months, her body had never left the building. The apparition also reportedly told her that the son was continuing to collect her Social Security payments every month. Apparently, he had failed to properly report his mother's death and had hidden her body so that he could continue getting her money even after her death. Winkowski promised the woman that she would take care of it. Only then is the deceased woman said to have been willing to leave the house and go into the light. Winkowski and her husband then immediately left the building and called the police. What the officers reportedly found upstairs afterward was horrifying. Inside a large plastic bag that had been sealed with tape was indeed the body of an elderly woman. The investigation reportedly determined that she had died of natural causes. According to Winkowski, her son was charged with Social Security fraud and abuse of a corpse. This raises a deeply unsettling question. Did this woman's soul remain in the house because her body had been hidden and her death had been exploited for fraudulent purposes? Perhaps she didn't want revenge, but simply wanted to be found and finally receive a dignified farewell. The case was recounted by Winkowski herself in an interview in 2024. Since neither the names of those involved nor the location or any identifiable police records have been made public, the sequence of events currently cannot be independently verified. But if her account is true, it wasn't a clue from the world of the living that led to the hidden body, but the deceased woman herself. Number 3, the mysterious signs from beyond. This story begins neither in an abandoned house nor in a cemetery at night. It begins in the life of a woman who dedicated her career to science, and one night experienced something that would profoundly shake her understanding of consciousness and death. Dr. Tara Swart-Bieber is a physician, neuroscientist, and former psychiatrist. She was accustomed to examining extraordinary perceptions rationally and separating psychological processes from verifiable facts. At first, the idea of being able to communicate with the dead did not fit at all into her scientifically shaped worldview. But her conviction would later change fundamentally. In 2021, her husband Robin Bieber died of leukemia. Doctors had given him about 2 weeks to live, but he lived for another 3.5 weeks. Robin eventually died at home, just 2 days before the couple's 4th wedding anniversary. Instead of celebrating that day with him, Tara was reading condolence cards. The loss hit her with devastating force. When she looked at Robin's body after his death, she had an overwhelming thought. This body was no longer her husband. Whatever had made Robin no longer seemed to be in it. In the weeks that followed, Tara noticed something strange. Almost every time she looked out the window, she saw robins. She saw the birds both at her home in Hampshire and in London, and, according to her, more often than ever before or since. She still didn't want to see a message in this. Tara knew that she was searching for her deceased husband, and might therefore be particularly alert to his name. But about 6 weeks after Robin's death, something happened that was far more difficult for her to explain. At around 4 a.m., Tara was awakened by a loud noise. Because her house had been broken into before, She got up and checked whether an alarm had been triggered. She found nothing unusual, returned to bed, and fell asleep again. But now, things get truly mysterious. Because then, she suddenly felt a powerful jolt to her shoulder. Tara opened her eyes and saw a large, blurry figure right beside her bed. At first, it was only a pale outline, but within moments, the apparition became clearer. Tara believed she could make out Robin's hair, his face, and finally his entire body. She later described it as though Robin had to fight his way through a thick, invisible substance in order to become visible to her. Then the figure began to dissolve from top to bottom. His head and upper body disappeared first, while his legs and feet remained visible for a brief moment. Then Robin was gone. For Tara, this encounter became a turning point. She, of all people, the former psychiatrist, wondered whether grief, depression, or some other exceptional psychological state could have influenced her perception. She even visited several mediums, but was not convinced by what they told her. If a connection with Robin was possible, she wanted to establish it herself. From then on, she began intensely exploring the question of whether consciousness or the soul could exist independently of the body. At the same time, she noticed other personal signs: white feathers, hearts, infinity symbols, and recurring numbers. On the second anniversary of his death, she was traveling through the U.S. In her mind, she asked Robin for an unusual sign, a phoenix, which for her symbolized continuing to live after profound devastation. Shortly afterward, she drove past a restaurant called Phoenix Garden. And although her team had planned a direct flight to Los Angeles, Tara ended up having to travel through Phoenix, Arizona, of all places, on the anniversary of her husband's death. Are events like these merely coincidences that our deep longing gives special meaning to? Or could a soul, if it truly survives death, use familiar images to reach a loved one? Tara's experiences are not scientific proof of life after death. The apparition occurred shortly after waking and could have been influenced by this transitional state, as well as by her intense grief. The later signs can also be explained by heightened attention. For Tara, however, they were not meaningless coincidences, but clearly messages from her husband that changed her understanding of death forever. Number 2. The dead Hollywood star who haunted his ex-wife. Catherine Lanassa had believed in ghosts for a long time, but after the death of her former husband, Dennis Hopper, that belief became a disturbing reality for her, because the famous Hollywood star is said to have visited her not just once. His apparitions reportedly haunted her for years. Lanassa met Hopper in the late 1980s when she was still working as a ballet dancer. Despite their large age difference, they married in 1989 and had a son together named Henry. Although the marriage ended as early as 1992, a deep connection remained between them through their child and their shared past. On May 29, 2010, Dennis Hopper died at the age of 74 from complications of prostate cancer. His final months were overshadowed by severe illness and a bitter divorce battle with his fifth wife, Victoria Duffy. But even after his body had been buried, Hopper did not seem to have completely disappeared from Catherine Lanassa's life. In an interview in 2026, she openly stated, "Dennis Hopper's ghost wouldn't leave me alone for a very long time." His first visits were anything but pleasant. Hopper did not appear to her healthy or peaceful, but in frightening images that recalled his physical weakness shortly before his death. One encounter in particular became deeply etched in her memory. Lanassa saw Hopper at an event she described as the Academy Awards. He was sitting in a wheelchair, weak, helpless, and ravaged by his illness. Suddenly, he collapsed to the floor before her eyes, For Lanasa, the scene was so frightening and emotional that she suffered from it for a long time afterward. And apparently, it didn't end with this one apparition. Again and again, she said she felt his presence, accompanied by an overwhelming physical reaction. His visits reportedly completely overwhelmed her and caused her to break out in a sweat. What might seem like intense dreams to outsiders felt to Lanasa as though Hopper were actually intruding into her space. Why did he appear to her in these painful images of all things? Was he trying to tell her something? Or was his soul itself still trapped in the final, agonizing moments of his life? Lanasa later suspected that Hopper might have sought her out because of the special familiarity of their former relationship. Although they had been divorced for many years, she was the last of his former wives, with whom there was no new divorce conflict at the time of his death. Perhaps, she thought, that was precisely why his soul had sought closeness or support from her. But eventually, the visits became too distressing. Lanasa finally made the decision to confront the apparition. She clearly told Dennis that he had to leave her alone and go. And indeed, after that, the frightening encounter stopped. But now, Lanasa was plagued by a new feeling. She wondered whether she had rejected him too harshly, and whether something unspoken had remained between them. On the very day she told someone about these doubts, she took an unusual route on her way home, and completely unexpectedly came across a gallery where photographs by Dennis Hopper were on display. Hopper was not only an actor and director, but also a passionate photographer. Lanasa entered the exhibition and discovered an image of him all the way in the back. He was wearing a fedora and winking at the camera. To her, it seemed like one final, reconciliatory response, as though he wanted to say that he understood and was now ready to let her go. But Hopper returned one more time. In an extraordinarily vivid dream, the two of them were in a cafeteria in Greece. This time, he appeared neither desperate nor ravaged by his illness. Hopper told her that he was doing well and that he was no longer in pain. After that, according to Lanasa, she never heard from him again. Perhaps his first apparitions were merely vivid dreams, triggered by memories of his illness, their shared past, and concern for the father of her son. There are neither recordings nor independent witnesses to the encounters. But for Lanasa, the disturbing visits, the unexpected photograph, and the final dream formed a coherent message. Dennis Hopper had initially been unable to find peace, and only said goodbye after they were both able to let each other go. Number 1. The Ghost in the Bed. The Eerie night vision recording. Night after night, a man had the unsettling feeling that he wasn't alone in his own bedroom. While he slept, someone seemed to sit down on the mattress. Sometimes, he even thought he could feel an invisible hand pulling at his blanket. An extremely creepy thought. Eventually, he wanted to know for sure and set up a motion-activated night vision camera. What this camera recorded was posted online by his daughter Shai in April 2019. Within a very short time, the disturbing images spread across social media. The footage shows the darkened room and the large bed in which Shai's father is sleeping. At first, everything seems completely still. But then the blanket begins to move. The fabric slowly rises, as though something underneath it were crawling out. At the left edge of the bed, a pale, human-like shape suddenly appears. For a brief moment, it looks as though a second person is sitting up there. The indistinct figure appears to have a head, shoulders, and an upper body, but no clear facial features can be made out. Then, the apparition tips to the side in a strangely fluid motion. It doesn't simply fall back under the blanket, but seems to gradually merge with the darkness before the camera's eyes. A few seconds later, it has completely disappeared. All that remains is the rumpled blanket. Shai explained that her father had been sound asleep throughout the entire incident. The camera had only activated when the fabric began to move. Afterward, her father is said to have remained almost completely motionless in bed for several more minutes. If he didn't cause this movement himself, an eerie question arises. Was the unsettling feeling that had haunted him night after night perhaps more than just a dream? And did exactly what had previously made itself known only through a sinking mattress and a moving blanket reveal itself in front of the camera that night? There is no definitive answer. Some viewers see the figure as nothing more than the sleeping man's arm or elbow, which appears unusually large because of the poor image quality and unfavorable camera angle. Since no footage from a second perspective exists, it essentially remains unclear what actually rose beside him that night. What do you think? Do ghosts really exist? Is there such a thing as an immortal soul? And which case personally shocked you the most? Write it in the comments below. We're very curious to hear your opinions. If you enjoyed the video, we'd really appreciate a like and a subscription. Thank you.